Chapter 1: The Rise of Corporate Nations. As the sun rose over the sprawling national capital region in 2124, its golden rays glinted off the sleek skyscrapers that dominated the new skyline that was non-existent a generation ago. These towering structures, adorned with the logos of powerful Indian and international corporations, stood as monuments to the radical transformation that had reshaped the world over the past century, especially Asia. Arjun Patel, a 28-year-old software engineer, gazed out the window of his 87th-floor apartment in Noida, his eyes tracing the familiar silhouette of the megacity he grew up in. The national capital region, encompassing present-day Delhi and its satellite cities of Noida, Faridabad, and Gurgaon and beyond. It had become a marvel of urban planning and technological integration, much needed for the incredible urbanization the country had seen. An intricate network of high-speed maglev trains, subway network which had crossed 1,000 km and autonomous flying vehicles, connected every corner of this vast metropolis, making connectivity effortless and efficient. The region now served as the seat of power for the Indian subcontinent, a massive area controlled by mostly Indian corporations that now included India, Nepal, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Myanmar and Sri Lanka. This consolidation and merger of nations was the result of decades of political maneuvering, first by the Indian government and economic dominance by corporate entities. Despite its familiarity, Arjun couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had been lost in the relentless march of progress. The national capital region was a testament to corporate efficiency. Immaculately clean streets, abundant free public amenities, and meticulously designed recreation areas. Everything was optimized to keep the working professionals, as the working class was now euphemistically called, in a mental and physical state focused on peak productivity. The world of 2124 was a far cry from the geopolitical landscape of the early 21st century. The once fierce rivalry between the Indians and Chinese had evolved into an unprecedented alliance, born not from the desires of their people, but from the machinations of the corporate titans that now not just influenced but directed and ran national institutions and leadership of both countries. It had begun innocuously enough in the 2030s, with Indian corporations finally letting go all pretense of an equal relationship with the democratically elected government. The Chinese corporations, on the other hand, expanded their influence through strategic investments and political lobbying outside the country. Eventually, they controlled smaller nations in Africa and South America and used that to influence their home nation. As the traditional governments of both nations grappled with aging populations and economic challenges, the corporations stepped in, offering solutions wrapped in promises of efficiency and prosperity. The respective governments of both nations were either bribed or bullied into accepting these terms. However, they had become irrelevant when it came to the future of their nations and its citizens, and had become soulless rubber stamps. The global stage had shifted dramatically in the preceding decades. Russia, once a formidable power, had never truly recovered from its prolonged conflict with Ukraine, which had dragged on until 2026. The war had exhausted NATO countries while further enriching China and India, who had strategically positioned themselves to benefit from the conflict's aftermath. In the power vacuum left by Russia's decline and the West's economic fatigue, India and China began to exert their influence more aggressively. Initially competing with each other on the global stage, some smaller corporations took initiatives and partnered with each other, starting the landslide which broke the century-long animosity between the Asian powers. Slowly followed by one bilateral treaty after another and open border partnerships, decided cooperation was more beneficial. The first to be gobbled up were the smaller neighboring powers when China first through shared infrastructure and then economically absorbed Laos and Cambodia, while India did the same with Bangladesh in response. One by one, the smaller nations of the region were either manipulated or willingly decided to merge their infrastructure and supply chains with India and China, effectively surrendering much of their autonomy. Surprisingly, the citizens of these smaller nations largely supported these moves, enticed by the promise of access to job and business opportunities in the massive Asian economic powerhouses. The lure of prosperity, economic opportunities, and corrupt local leadership created opportunities that corporations were quick to exploit. By 2050, the transformation was well underway. In India, conglomerates like Neurosphere, a merger of tech giants specializing in brain-computer interfaces, and GenesisCure, a pharmaceutical behemoth focused on genetic therapies, had become so deeply entrenched in the nation's infrastructure that they practically wrote policy. Similarly, in China, entities like Quantech Dynamics, a quantum computing leader, and EcoSilk Innovations, partly owned by the Bangladeshi government, an advanced materials manufacturer specializing in eco-friendly fabrics, wielded immense power. blurring the lines between corporate and state interests. The watershed moment came in 2075 when a clandestine meeting was arranged in the National Capital Region between the industrial association heads of the most powerful Indian and Chinese corporations. For months, rumors swirled about the nature of these talks. The elected leadership, with their limited power and influence along with civil society groups and worker unions, tried finding out the results. Eventually, the current reality of the direction of where a third of the world's population is headed was announced. Arjun, then a curious teenager, remembered the day the announcement was made. He had been sitting in his family's living room, surrounded by holographic displays showing news feeds from around the world. The image of Vikram Malhotra, CEO of Neurosphere, and Li Xiaoping, chairwoman of Quantec Dynamics, shaking hands flash across every screen. Today, Malhotra had declared, his voice steady and assured, "We usher in a new era of cooperation between our great nations. No longer will we be divided by borders or held back by outdated notions of competition. Together, we will forge a future of unprecedented prosperity and innovation." Li, at the same time, made the same announcement after his trip back to Beijing. The merger that followed was nothing short of revolutionary. Long-standing border disputes over regions like Arunachal Pradesh, Kashmir, and Bhutan were resolved practically overnight. The harassment of corporations by local government authorities backed by competing corporations ended overnight. Trade restrictions like restrictions on Indian pharmaceutical exports by the Chinese and Chinese financial services in India was lifted. It was as if a century of tension had evaporated in an instant. But as Arjun and millions of others soon discovered, this new alliance came at a price. The corporations, now unfettered by national boundaries, began to reshape society according to their vision of efficiency and productivity. In the years that followed, the cultural landscape of both nations underwent a dramatic transformation. Traditional Indian concepts of Jugat, innovative problem-solving, and Atithi Devo Bhava, guest is God, were melded with Chinese principles of Guangxi, relationship building, and Mianzai, saving face. The result was a hybrid culture that emphasized both creativity and social harmony, but always in service of corporate goals. Festivals took on new meanings. Diwali, once a celebration of the victory of light over darkness, was rebranded as World Innovation Day, where employees were expected to present new ideas to boost productivity. The Chinese New Year evolved into Fiscal New Year, with bonuses tied to company performance rather than traditional red envelopes. Even language evolved to reflect this new reality. A new dialect emerged, blending Hindi and various other Indian languages, Mandarin and English, into a lingua franca known as CorpoSpeak. Children learned this language from an early age, with traditional mother tongues relegated to cultural studies classes. Arjun sighed, turning away from the window. He walked over to his personal AI assistant, a sleek device that sat on his desk. "Zai," he said, addressing the AI, "what's my schedule for today?" The AI's holographic display flickered to life, showing the default avatar of a young woman with features that blended Indian and Chinese characteristics. "Good morning, Arjun," Shai replied in CorpoSpeak, heavily influenced by Hindi and Punjabi. "Your first meeting is at 0900 hours with the NeuroQuant team to discuss the new social credit algorithm." Arjun nodded, a slight frown creasing his brow. The social credit system, adapted from early Chinese models and enhanced with Indian data analytics, had become a cornerstone of society. Every citizen's actions were monitored and scored, determining everything from job opportunities to travel privileges. Behavioral sciences had achieved new breakthroughs in this field. Positive behaviors were encouraged through nudges and cultural influenced and behaviorally run models, while negative behaviors were discouraged in a similar manner. As he prepared for his day, Arjun couldn't help but reflect on the changes he'd witnessed in his lifetime. The merger had brought undeniable technological advancements. Quantum computing had revolutionized everything from weather prediction to drug discovery. Nanotechnology, perfected in Indian labs and mass-produced in Chinese factories, had transformed medicine and manufacturing. Yet, for all these advancements, there was an undercurrent of unease that Arjun couldn't shake. The corporation's control extended far beyond the economic sphere, seeping into every aspect of daily life. Education had been completely overhauled, with curricula designed to produce workers tailored to corporate needs. History books were rewritten to emphasize the inevitability and benefits of corporate rule. Philosophy classes focused on the ethics of efficiency and the morality of productivity. Even relationships were not immune to corporate influence. Marriage algorithms, supposedly designed to create perfect matches, often paired individuals from different cultural backgrounds to promote integration. Child rearing was subject to corporate guidelines, with parents given performance reviews, based on their children's development and future potential as employees. As Arjun left his apartment and entered the bustling streets of Noida, he was struck by the contrasts around him. Temples and mosques stood in the shadows of gleaming corporate headquarters. However, the relevance of religion had seen a steep dive after the corporations took over. Humanized robots selling traditional chai and filter coffee shared space with sleek vending machines, dispensing the over 100 versions of Neurobrew, a scientifically formulated drink designed to maximize cognitive performance. The air was cleaner than it had ever been in history, thanks to advanced filtration systems and the widespread adoption of clean energy. Yet, Arjun couldn't help but feel that something essential had been filtered out along with the pollutants: a vibrancy, a chaos, a humanity that had once defined the region. The India of yesteryears, of what Arjun's great-grandparents talked about, seemed to have more or less gone. As he walked, his augmented reality contact lenses provided a constant stream of information. Every person he passed was instantly identified, their social credit score floating above their heads like a digital halo. With Arjun's special access to the database, advertisements personalized based on his browsing history and genetic profile flickered in his peripheral vision. Arjun made his way to the massive Neurosphere building, its facade a seamless blend of glass and nanomaterials that changed color throughout the day to maximize energy efficiency. As he approached, facial recognition scanners confirmed his identity and the doors slid open silently. Inside, the lobby was a hive of activity. Holographic displays showed real-time data on global markets and beyond, resource allocation and productivity metrics. Employees from diverse backgrounds moved purposefully, their conversations a mix of CorpoSpeak and technical jargon. As Arjun stepped into the elevator, he overheard a snippet of conversation between two colleagues. "Did you hear about the protests in Sector 7? One whispered, glancing around nervously. "SHH," the other hissed. "You know, it's just idiots being idiots. Who knows what they want now? It's endless. The management will sort it out." The elevator doors closed before Arjun could hear more. But the exchange left him unsettled. It wasn't the first time he'd heard whispers of any discontent which wasn't related to their immediate manager. Despite the corporation's best efforts to project an image of harmony and progress, there were cracks in the facade barely visible, but they were there. In recent months, there had been reports of small-scale protests in various cities across the Indo-Chinese region. Workers demanding better conditions, students calling for more diverse education, artists pushing back against corporate censorship. These incidents were quickly suppressed, but they hinted at a growing undercurrent of resistance. As the elevator ascended to the 200th floor, Arjun's mind wandered to his grandmother, one of the few remaining links to the world before the corporate takeover. She often spoke of a time when people had more freedom, when life wasn't dictated by algorithms and productivity scores. Her stories had planted a seed of doubt in Arjun's mind, one that had grown steadily over the years. The elevator chimed, snapping Arjun back to the present. As he stepped out into the bustling office, he steeled himself for another day of working on systems designed to optimize human resource management algorithms. But beneath his compliant exterior, a quiet rebellion was brewing, one that would soon connect him to a network of like-minded individuals, determined to reclaim a new version of freedom in a world owned and operated by corporate interests. Meanwhile, thousands of kilometers away in Shanghai, Mei Zhang was beginning her day with a similar sense of unease. At 26, Mei was a rising star in the field of quantum biology, working for Quantech Dynamics. She came from a family of engineers, philosophers, and academics, and had always been groomed for success, be it in the corporate world or academics and research. Mei's apartment in the heart of Shanghai's tech district offered a breathtaking view of the city's futuristic skyline. Like the national capital region now in Shanghai had been transformed into a paragon of corporate efficiency. The Bund, once a symbol of colonial-era architecture, now served as a museum of sorts, dwarfed by the towering headquarters of China's corporate giants. As Mei prepared for her day, she couldn't shake off a feeling of discontent that had been growing within her for months. On the surface, everything seemed perfect. Poverty and unemployment had been all but eradicated a generation ago. People generally seemed happier and more content than they had been ever before. The merger between Indian and Chinese interests had brought unprecedented prosperity to both nations and their satellites. Yet something felt profoundly wrong to Mei, though she struggled to articulate exactly what it was. As she sipped her morning tea, a Longjing blend specially formulated by Quantech's nutrition division to enhance cognitive function, she found herself questioning the very foundations of the society she had grown up in. "Lan," Mei called out to her AI assistant, "what's on the agenda for today?" A holographic interface materialized, displaying a schedule packed with meetings and research presentations. "Good morning, Mei," Lan responded in CorpoSpeak. "Your first appointment is at 0830 hours. The Quantac board is eager to hear about your progress on the consciousness transfer project." Mei nodded, a mixture of pride and apprehension washing over her. The consciousness transfer project was cutting-edge technology that promised to revolutionize human existence. In theory, it would allow human consciousness to be uploaded into quantum computers, potentially granting a form of digital immortality. It was the kind of breakthrough that scientists had been working on for decades. And yet, as Mei gathered her materials for the presentation, she couldn't help but wonder about the ethical implications of such technology. Who would have access to it? Who would own it? How would it be regulated? And more importantly, what would it mean for the very nature of human existence? These were questions that Mei found increasingly difficult to discuss with her colleagues or even her family. Ethical dilemmas such as these tended to take a backseat in a world where efficiency and productivity were prized above all else. Philosophical musings, which were quite often discussed on the family dinner table, were often seen as a waste of time in the outside world at best, and potentially subversive at worst. As Mei left her apartment and made her way to the Quantec Dynamics headquarters, she was always carried with her a sense of mild amazement. Despite growing up in this environment with the seamless integration of technology in everyday life, autonomous vehicles glided silently through the streets while drones buzzed overhead delivering packages and guiding traffic flow. Every surface seemed to be a potential screen, bombarding citizens with a constant stream of information and advertisements. She found it beautiful in a way, and something to remind her of her great-grandmother who was a painter. Her great-grandfather had covered every wall in the house with his wife's artwork. The streets were clean, the air was pure, and petty crime was virtually non-existent thanks to over a century of omnipresent surveillance, and to a large extent, a vastly more efficient judiciary. Yet Mei couldn't shake the feeling that something vital had been lost in this pursuit of perfection. The vibrant street life she remembered from her childhood visits to her great-grandparents' old Hutong neighborhood had been replaced by efficient but sterile public spaces. As she entered the Quantec building, Mei's thoughts turned to her upcoming presentation. She knew her research could change the fortune of her entire department, but she was beginning to question whether that change would be for the better. The corporations had brought stability and prosperity, but at a cost which people were still struggling to fathom. Little did Mei know that her path would soon intersect with Arjun's, and that together, they would play a crucial role in challenging the very foundations of this shiny new world they lived in. As both of them settled into their respective workstations, a small storm of doubts, confusion and anxiety was brewing in their hearts, one that would soon connect them to a network of individuals determined to reclaim the direction of human culture in a world ruled by corporate interests. The stage was set for a clash between the forces of corporate control and the indomitable human spirit, a battle that would determine the fate of billions and redefine the very nature of freedom in the 20th